It's so beautiful. He's finally our main character. But isn't it happening too fast? What's up, guys? I'm Hunter here, and here to do a breakdown / discussion on whether or not Itadori Yuji's massive, and I mean massive, and I mean gargantuan growth in this back third, really back fourth, really back fifth of the series of Jujutsu Kaisen is a little bit too speedy, a little bit too rushed, and ultimately could have been paced better, or whether or not it makes sense within the context of the narrative. And even if it does make sense in the context of the narrative, is it still too fast based on the way that the story of JJK is structured? We have a whole lot to talk about, and while we do have a decent chunk of time, let's not waste any more time and let's hop right into it. Heading me, are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do happen to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. And another fun fact, Yuji Itadori has finally unlocked his domain expansion. I say unlocked very specifically for a reason that we'll get into in a little bit, but it's here. We have it. It's on the table now. It's the one thing that Itadori Yuji was lacking, at least in my opinion, before you started to put him in discussions of top 5. Definitely top 3. Top 4, and many people refuse to even put him in their top 10 while he lacked this very, very, very specific tool. And while the other tools that he had seemed to not have certain properties that other wielders of the exact same tools had. Yuji Itadori has been a character of great conflict, and not just in terms of the narrative balance of him being the main character, and thusly he's going to be fighting a bunch of other characters within the narrative, but also just in general as the main character. People have many, and I mean many, and I mean many, many, many opinions on Itadori and his overall power level and how that relates to his role in the narrative as our main character. And ultimately, how they think his lack of overall power for the longest time in the narrative relative to a lot of his contemporaries and to the antagonist group was a bad thing. And ultimately why it made Yuji a faux main character, a false main character, a main character who wasn't really a main character, more so a side character propped up to be the main character. Personally, I'd always loved that about Yuji. I'm not the biggest fan of the overpowered main character. You've likely heard my complaints somewhere, somehow, some way if you watched any other video on this channel. But if you haven't, let me let you know right now, I don't like them. I think they're kind of boring, and I think they over-centralize the narrative around themselves. Don't get me wrong, I'm fine when you write around an overpowered main character. It's a very big case in the story of Dragon Ball that a lot of it, especially during Z, is just waiting till Goku gets there and trying to survive until he does. And when it's not Goku, it's usually someone else who's overpowered at the time. But still, that is fine. But a lot of authors tend to have a main character that's so powerful that the narrative has no choice but to kind of break over their knee. And if you want to focus the story around that and build it into the character themselves, that's fine. Satoru Gojo isn't the main character, but that's an example from JJK, and Saitama from One Punch Man is a fantastic example of an overpowered, super swole main character who has existential crises because he's super strong, overpowered, and the main character. So, that's fine, but Yuji Itadori has been weak. Even as one of the biggest, nastiest, gargantuan Yuji stands on the planet, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that this boy was overpowered ever. Heck, in my opinion, I don't think he's overpowered now. In spite of all the power he's gained, despite getting a domain expansion, symbol domain, blood manipulation, cleave, dismantle, soul punches, soul boundary perception, these weird, freaky claw, elbow, hand thing, all that, I still don't think bro's overpowered. Arguably enough, I'll make a whole separate video talking about this, so hear me when I say it, and you can ask questions in the comments, but hear me when I say, I don't think Yuji's even special grade yet. Yes, I know that sounds crazy for me to say, but hear me out. Eventually in another video, or I may talk about it a little bit here, but still, in spite of all that, I don't think Yuji's overpowered. Nowhere near. In fact, I'll be completely real with you. If this man right here, who had just gotten his RCT back, had like 2 more minutes with Yuji before Yuji figured out how to do the whole shebang domain, he would have been cooked. Absolutely. I'm sorry, even with how fragile Sukuna's soul was, the chapter is very clear about Yuji's lack of relativity to this Sukuna. Look at how he legit manhandles Yuji. After this body slam through a building, not a single proper hit is landed by Yuji for the rest of the chapter until he skips the whole hitting process and leaps straight to domain. Because there's a sure hit effect, and Sukuna doesn't have his technique back. One of the weakest variations of Sukuna we've seen, by the way. Bro's one soul dismantle away from splitting off from Megami. That's how bad it was. And even still, Yuji could basically do nothing to him after hitting super duper crazy amounts of black flashes. But okay, you may be wondering, fine, Pencil Man, you don't think that... Well, am I overpowered? Most certainly not. I need to get in the gym. But still, okay, Pencil Man, you don't think Yuji's overpowered. But you do have to acknowledge his power growth. Once again, Yuji for the longest time was a character who many didn't even have in their top 10s. Now, he's consistently in discussion for top 5. After his power growth. If that isn't a massive leap, I don't know what is. There was a long time, and by long time, I mean like literally. Let me take a whiff. When did he get confirmed to have blood manipulation? A technique? Like the 240s? Like there was a long time where Yuji was flat out techniqueless in a manga that's heavily centered around having unique technique-based abilities. And the one technique he got, he wasn't even good at. He sucked at blood manipulation. That's a whole plot point. He's actual booty meat with it. So, Yuji, going from no technique man to two technique so good man that he's now domain expansioning man, the peak of Jujutsu, the hardest thing in Jujutsu to do. Obviously, that's a big leap. But the question now is, okay, so Yuji was weak. He made a big leap in the span of about... what? Higuruma and Yuji spawn in 238. The most recent chapter is 264. That's a little over 30 chapters. About 36, I do believe. I'm doing math on the top of my head. If it's wrong, correct me. So in the span of 36 chapters, Yuji went from relatively fodder to arguably the peak of the verse. Is he actually up there? No. But still, a lot of people are now hyping Yuji to that extreme. But with that being the case, does it make sense? Why would Yuji get so strong? Has the narrative gone out of its way to justify such a drastic leap in strength? And, at least in my opinion, based on what we know and what we've seen and what we've had to do in the narrative so far, Gege, at bare minimum, has laid levels upon levels upon levels upon levels upon levels of justification for Yuji's... I feel like exponential growth may even be an understatement. Man, the boy don't keep it for. He was a Ryu victim. Okay, admittedly, a lot of the verses are Ryu victim because Ryu's my GOAT. But still, Yuji Itadori is a character who, arguably more than the original Potential Man, has been kind of... You hear that? You hear that? He's been knocking on the door of Potential Man status for the longest time. From early on, and by early on, I mean like the first couple pages of chapter 1, this man's been noted to be a freak. And like, not in the freaky deaky way, like Mr. Forearms over here. No, in the, this man's a prodigy of prodigies around prodigies around prodigies. Bro was built special. Like, literally more than we knew, built special. Before getting a lick, a taste, a drop of cursed energy, he was the fastest, strongest, not smartest, but fastest and strongest being on the planet. Breaking world records by casually pitching shot puts and running at speeds faster than Usain Bolt ever could. Just a regular dude. He's literally nothing but straight muscle. I believe he's like 88 kilograms with like 0.00001% body fat. Before cursed energy. He's just like that. And then the moment he gets cursed energy, he's known to be a freak. A beast, an animal, a creature. On top of that, he's also noted to have a weirdly strong, not just soul and biology, but like soul and biology, in the sense that he's able to suppress the King of Curses so well. And for the longest time, we didn't know why. But early on, like I said, as early as the first chapter, Yuji has been noted as an exception. Even Yuta Kotsu, the previous main character who was also noted as an exception, was an exception for a different reason. He was an exception for his exceptional amounts of cursed energy and his connection to Rika, something he created. But, once again, that was based purely in the Jujutsu world, entirely separate from Yuji, who initially wasn't based in the Jujutsu world. He was just a physical monster. And top that off with this. The idea that, for the longest time, we didn't know what it was, but then we later get confirmed that no. Mr. Itadori here isn't just a case of real good genetics. He's actually genuinely a case of biological experimentation by the oldest and smartest character in the entire series. outside of maybe Tengen, because Tengen may be older than Big Jaku, but Big Jaku is most certainly the smartest character. Not the strongest, far from it, but Big Jaku is clearly the smartest. They made Yuji, and they didn't just make Yuji with anybody. And you know what I mean when I say make Yuji. They made Yuji, if you know what I'm talking about. But with it being the case, they made Yuji in a very, very, very specific way. As Urume asks in 257, who exactly is Yuji Itadori?
Kenjaku's child. I don't know from which body. I once sensed
the same thing in him as in you, though his face made me laugh. Your residuals in that vessel aren't enough to explain it. He's too powerful for an empty shell.
Well, Kenjaku wouldn't have a child for no reason. Perhaps his mate was my other half reincarnated, and thus possessed the same soul.
Your other half?
I was almost born as twins. Maybe my mother was starving. Rather than starve myself, I ate my other half. Then that soul wandered and mated with Kenjaku. The cursed objects that are Sukuna's fingers were sealed in Yuji Itadori. Even though he was born as a player in the Culling Games. I suppose it was necessary to strengthen the vessel.
Is that so? Does that mean that Yuji Itadori has the potential equal to Sukuna? For the longest time, Yuji's potential was a mystery, but it was well highlighted. From early on, it was acknowledged by Megami, it was acknowledged by Gojo, it was acknowledged by literally every character who had even the slightest eye for potential. Yuji's potential for growth was massive. And in fact, let's be real, we've seen his potential for growth be insane earlier on. Trace it all the way back to the Goodwill event. The man went from a chef with a bunch of ingredients that he didn't understand to someone who could accurately divine the tastes of them by entering into a quote-unquote BFF, Black Flash Fever. He landed more Black Flashes in succession, despite being a sorcerer for a period of maybe 2 months, after being executed for a majority of those months, or a couple of them, and came back and did that. And then power cliffed so hard, he became a grade 1 sorcerer in terms of striking strength, also with very minimal training. And then he proceeded to run through and stomp on grade 1 level sorcerers with no cursed energy like Higuruma in the Culling Games. And then he had an entire month to train to himself. Yuji's potential has always been there. It's always been hidden, sprinkled in the depths. It's just a part of the character, naturally. And also, naturally, being a part of the character is the truth of the character. He has every single reason to have insane potential. His mother is the smartest character in the series, who also is an extremely powerful and extremely knowledgeable sorcerer who did biological experimentation on him. Yeah, makes sense. He was born with, infused with one of Sukuna's fingers. You know, the things that make cursed spirits that are random fodder, as long as they consume them, special grade monsters immediately. And also, his daddy was the other half of Sukuna, undisputably the strongest character in this creation. So you smack all that together, and you fuse it into one being, and then you allow that being to awaken with the sparks of black, after finally being given time to actually temper that potential with people who are willing to train him, after his body has been used again and again and again and again with the very peaks of Jujutsu, so the muscle memory is already fundamentally built in, all of that, in my opinion, it makes perfect sense that this freak of nature would get this strong, because he's not even really a freak of nature. He's a freak of science, jujutsu, and nature. Yuji's not normal. He never was. Even more in a way that Gojo was not normal. Even more in a way that Megami was not normal. Gojo was random chance as far as we know. Unless we somehow, in these last couple chapters, get some sort of extrapolation on the idea of God in the JJK universe, and it's revealed that Satoru Gojo was legit meant to act as a natural balance patch from the universe, and the lord of the JJK series was like, yeah, let's just rewrite it and just throw Gojo in there to do that. And unless it's revealed that Sukuna was some sort of act of divine intervention that ended up going wrong, and he became the fallen, the disgraced one, against the words of some higher power, unless that gets confirmed, Gojo was naturally born that way. Sukuna was naturally born that way. Even Big Jaku was naturally born that way, presumably. Megami, Toji, Maki, all the other Hakari, Yuta Okotu, all of them were just natural anomalies. Yuki Tsukumo, Suguru Geto, all of them were natural. Yuji's the one character, the one, singular, in a series full of freaks, prodigies, monsters, beasts, and demons that is completely unnatural, down to his very conception. I'm sorry, but that's what I'm talking about. Gege didn't just say, Yuji real strong, we're gonna buff him up a whole bunch. He said, Yuji's real strong. Here are the 15 different reasons why he's real strong. His daddy, his mama, his other daddy, weird cursed energy sense in Sukuna, and the finger of his other daddy that was born into him. Plus whatever freaky stuff Kenjaku did to him biologically. That's the thing. So much went into laying the groundwork for Yuji's potential that I think the narrative did a good enough job laying the basis, laying the groundwork. I'm not mad at that. But, remember what I mentioned in the intro. It's beautiful. It's hyped. It's fantastic to see the boy with potential equal to Sukuna, as Urume theorizes, start to express that potential. But why did it take so long? Like, okay, Yuji's potential man. He's always been potential man. He's been the potential man of potential man of potential man. Fine, whatever. And we now know that he's been this potential man since birth. He came out as mama. Big flexing. But then why did it take so long? What's the issue? Why did Yuji only get shrine now? Only get blood manipulation now? Only start to understand barriers now? Only get to... Because realize, a long stretch of the series, Yuji has no downtime and no one who would actually train him in a decent way that would allow him to realize his genuine potential. Remember, Yuji was born techniqueless. He was. Despite all his innate potential, he didn't have a technique. Remember, the only reason Yuji even developed Shrine isn't because he himself was innately born with it. It's because his body, as Satoru Gojo theorized super duper early on, was engraved with Sukuna's curse technique. He may be using a hollow variation of it. It's why it's his own. Because it's the remnants of Sukuna's shrine engraved into his flesh that he's trying to figure out how to use. He never had time to figure out how to do that. And it's very likely that Sukuna was pulling a Kurama. I hate to say the comparison, especially considering Sukuna and Kurama, in terms of character arc and character perspectives, are fundamentally different. But remember what Kurama was doing to Naruto for like all of his life until late Shippuden. Kurama was actively holding that man back. He was like, I'm going to mess up your chakra control. I'm going to make sure you suck at doing chakra things. In fact, I'm going to make sure you burn way more extra amounts of your crazy amounts of latent potential just because I like you, dog. And Sukuna most certainly was doing the exact same thing. We know Sukuna already had innate influence over his vessels and their motivations and stuff like that, based on how we see him manipulate Yuji's body whenever he gets access to it. And even when he's just there. Remember, the two famous, at this point, marks on Yuji's face are a constant showing of the influence of Sukuna. Sukuna was always there. Sukuna was always listening, even when Sukuna was dead silent. So Sukuna was likely consistently manipulating Yuji to just not have Shrine. Keep pulling him back. Absolutely. The only time Yuji could finally unlock it, or finally start to dive deeper into it, is when Sukuna left. The thing that was holding him back, the sentient creature that has the most powerful soul in the entire series that we've ever seen, once it finally left his body, yeah, his body finally started to adjust and figure out what to do with it. And also, he just didn't have a technique. He had to eat his siblings for that. The rest of the blood manipulation brothers, the rest of Kenjaku's children, he had to consume those in order to get blood manipulation. And let's be real, he kind of sucks at it still. Ultimately, he didn't actually get that much for blood manipulation. He's kind of, I just think he's got a booty meat with it, because he just didn't have the time. And when he finally had the time to actually lock in and learn some basics, learn some potential stuff, we got to see him cook. Realize the whole run of the series, from its start to Shibuya into the Culling Games, is pretty much nonstop. Yuji goes on missions, dies, spends a few months learning about cursed energy, the basic fundamentals from Gojo in Gojo's own roundabout way, and it's already admitted numerous times in the narrative that Gojo isn't the best of teachers because he picks up on everything naturally, and then he didn't really train with anybody else. He may have had 1 or 2 missions with Nanami, then went into Goodwill, and then not long after that, Shibuya happened, and then not long after that, the Culling Games happened, and then not long after that, we had the long time skip. Yuji never had time to train, never had time to learn, he had never had time to dig into his potential with people who could actually help express it. So when he was actually given that time, it makes sense that his growth would be so massive. But, okay. Fine then, Pencil Man. Sure. The groundwork for Yuji's potential was well laid out from numerous sources, and he had to eat things, including his own siblings, in order to get some modicum of power. Okay. Fine. Yuji Itadori never had time to train or figure out or get tech up, nor necessarily the intense motivation that the whole cast and crew did for the month time skip while they were training for the battle with Sukuna. Fine. But why is it all happening now? If Gege was a better writer, wouldn't they have paced this out more? Because, yes, it is genuinely insane that Yuji went from, I suck at blood manipulation, to hold on a second, I think I got the hang of this, let me whip out my domain expansion to immediately one-shot the King of Curses. Yeah, that's a big leap. Real big leap. Absolutely insane leap. Could have been paced out more? At least in my opinion, kind of no. The reason it had to wait this long is because you can't let Yuji be stronger earlier. You know how many problems happen in the narrative if Yuji's stronger earlier? Whole fights can't happen if Yuji's stronger earlier. Whole plot points can exist if Yuji's stronger earlier. Whole character moments can't exist if Yuji's stronger earlier. If Yuji had a domain, why didn't he whip it up before? He couldn't. Because he was fighting Sukuna, who has a superior domain, and Yuji's barrier skills, while better, as the chapter admits, thanks to replacement training with Atsuya Kusakabe, Yuji Itadori learned the basics of barriers. He has basics. He just barely managed to figure it out in time for the month to be up with Switch training. Even with his potential. So he couldn't have whipped out this domain before. And realize, once again, a reason that's happening so quickly is because he just recently got into another case of that BFF, that Black Flash fever. After the first one he hit in 256, there are 8 chapters between that and 264, where he unlocked his domain. And remember, Black Flash is meant to be the awakening. It's meant to be the restorative. It's meant to sort of do everything. It's meant to be the key. That's why Yuji being the one chosen by the Black Sparks is what allowed him to climb up so drastically. In certain ways, but not others. Reason he didn't master blood manipulation at all, he didn't even improve it, we haven't seen him even mention blood manipulation outside of his own regeneration, is because he just couldn't have the time to, and it wouldn't have been useful. But now, when he uses Black Flash, unlocks those sacred awakened eyes, and finally gets to reach par, yeah, he's going to keep landing them. He's going to keep getting a further understanding of his own cursed energy. He's going to keep developing as a sorcerer faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And let's be real, the jump of what Yuji learned isn't really that much. Realize his cleave is still relatively enough in its infancy. He doesn't even have a ranged variation of his shrine yet. Every single shrine we've seen Yuji use is close range. Remember? Even after upwards of 8 or 9 black flashes, the boy is still stuck at close range. That's what Sukuna admits. Ultimately, he can't hit me. Meanwhile, Sukuna's had a ranged dismantle for a while now, and Yuji's new cleave and even his soul-based dismantle is entirely based on anything but close range combat. Or far range combat. He needs to always get in close, even for dismantle, which is a ranged attack. Sure, it's likely because of the binding values you put on it, but if he could have done a ranged dismantle on Sukuna, I think he would have. So, be real with me. How big was the leap? He got blood manipulation, a technique he only uses for his regeneration. He got cleave and dismantle, another technique he can barely use, and he got domain expansion, which seemingly enough will mostly only be effective on incarnated sorcerers. Against Yuta, what does the domain do? Against Gojo, what does the domain do? Against Maki, what is half his kit? Like, think about it. Unless it's revealed something crazy, Yuji actually hasn't gotten that much stronger. He's just gotten a technique that he barely knows how to use and a domain that's very specific. That's it. So, does it seem like a lot? Absolutely. Is it actually a lot? Not really. At least not in my opinion. And once again, I'm fully fine if you disagree with this, but outside of those two techniques, both of which you can barely use, and the domain, which is important, but it's just an extension of domain basics that Kusakabe had long since mastered and taught Yuji how to use, just applying a technique into it, which he probably learned just on the fly after landing so many black flashes, and only did it against Sukuna while he was in domain cooldown because he probably just figured out how to do it. That's it. So, is Yuji's growth rushed? Not really. Because while he had the insane potential from the start, while he did have the potential all along inside him, while he was the potential man that we should have had faith in all along, and I did have faith in all along, he still hasn't reached it. He still hasn't gotten to the level of Sukuna. He hasn't gotten to the level of Gojo. In my opinion, he hasn't gotten to the level of Yuta Kotsu. He hasn't gotten to the level of Big Chaku. I want to say, once again, it really depends. Can Yuji air hop yet? I don't think he can. That's why he needed the platforms in 264. I don't think he can air hop yet. So I'm very hesitant to say he's reached the potential of like the other heavenly restriction users and Sukuna in terms of like just raw physicality, and based on the fact that he struggles to tag Sukuna. So like, but even still, Yuji's potential is insane. His growth is legendary, but he hasn't gained much, and he still has much more to master, refine, and learn. But the series is very, very close to ending. So ultimately, sure, his growth is fast, but it couldn't happen earlier in the narrative without breaking it. He couldn't do any of this earlier in the narrative because he either A, just unlocked it, or B, it would not have worked. And C, I think it's fine. Because sure, he can have this. At the end, Yuji's been a main character who's been through nothing but struggle. Nothing but agony. Nothing but pain and suffering. And if this is a sort of balancing of the scales, a restoration of the imbalance that was, in order to bring the king down, the underestimation of the potential of Yuji Itadori, the potential of his own son, his very nephew, whatever you would like to call it, isn't that the perfect way to bring Sukuna down? Having him unaware of the fact that just one cut, if it was destined to land, would end all that he worked for. Sounds good to me. And ultimately, I think Yuji's growth is fine. I don't really think it's rushed. I don't really think it contradicts anything in the narrative. And I think his growth isn't too drastic that even though it came all at once in bulk, it didn't necessarily change too much about how I perceive the character or how the characters just generally proceed. In fact, I don't really think it changes power ranking too much considering how specifically tailored it is to fighting Sukuna and people of his ilk. But, of course, that's what I think. Please tell me what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you guys think I'm absolutely crazy, nuts, boku bonkers, that Yuji's growth is too rushed, he got way too powerful, way too fast, and so maybe it's just a culmination of it all, and it's wackadoodle-doo? Or do you agree with me? And like ultimately, with all the build-up that Gege did, and how little Yuji's actually gained in the grand scheme of things, that it's fine. And honestly, it makes sense for a character of his caliber to finally become a character of his caliber in terms of his overall power and ability set. Please let me know all that and more in the comment section down below. I'd like to thank you so much for watching. Please remember to leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have to have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as low as $1 month. Things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. You'll also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks will include the live reaction to the very next chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen, ad-free variations of all my videos, and if you become a $25 patron or a $25 member, you can order whatever video you want. Also, you have a link to my Ko-Fi in the description down below where you can drop 5 beans for a short video, 25 beans for a long video, or any beans at all. Any support is always greatly appreciated. Now, I'd like to thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is Dad with a Pencil, writing off.
I'd like to thank you to our $3 members, Zena, Greyhound, Astro, Eternal Flame, NMA, Real Rare, G Prosper, Red Wolf 4765, and Paris Arnold. I'd like to give another big ol' thank you to our $5 patrons, Sean, Sammy, Midnight Lord 21, Kevin Encarnacion, Josh Brown, and A+A. And I'd like to give a great big thank you to our $7 members, Autumn Mornings Lazo, Fine, and That Guy. And I'd like to give a great big thank you to our $10 members, Robbie Uchiha, Jay Warrior, and Akid's Void. And I'd like to give big, hefty, juicy thank yous to our $10 patrons, Panda Goat, Michael Williamson, Metal Solid Crisis, Joaquin Munoz, and Idemo Kami. And I'd like to give the biggest, juiciest, meatiest, sloppiest, and heftiest thank you of them all to our $25 patron, Calvin Elder.